My name is Henry Dawson, and the night my son buried me alive, I was still breathing. I remember sitting in my old apartment, the one that smells of rain-soaked wood and forgotten years, when my neighbor's daughter showed me her phone. "Mr. Dawson, isn't this your family?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked down and there it was, a picture of my son, Adrian, raising a glass, surrounded by smiling faces under the caption, "To my father, may he rest in peace." For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. The cup of coffee slipped, shattered, and scalded my legs, but I didn't move. I just stared at the screen like it was a window into another world, one where I no longer existed. They were all there. My ex-wife, my daughter-in-law, even my sister who swore she'd always be by my side. Laughter. Music. My house, the house I built with my own hands, glowing behind them like a cruel stage light. And right there, in the center of it all, my son's smile. The same boy I carried on my shoulders when he broke his arm. The same boy who once told me, "Dad, I'll never forget what you did for me." Now he was toasting to my death. My death that never happened. 15 blocks away from that picture, I was alive, very much alive, holding the phone with trembling fingers while they celebrated my funeral. The words on that post burned deeper with every blink. "Rest in peace, Dad. You were my hero." My hero. The hypocrisy of it scraped at my chest until breathing felt wrong. I looked again at the background. The blue curtains. The old bookshelf. The leather sofa I spent 2 winters repairing. My home. My memories. All of it still standing except me. I don't remember standing up, but I must have, because when I came to, I was already pacing in that narrow apartment like a trapped animal. My reflection in the window stared back at me, pale, hollow-eyed, the ghost they wanted me to be. "Is this how they see me?" I whispered. "Forgotten." A convenient story for their comfort. The anger didn't come all at once. It crawled up my spine, slow and poisonous. How do you mourn a man who's still alive? How do you kill someone without laying a hand on them? I thought of calling my son. I even typed his number once. But what would I say? "Hey, son, your ghost is calling?" I deleted it. They wanted me gone, and I needed to know why. There had to be a reason. People don't erase blood without cause. The post had nearly 200 hearts and 100 comments. He was a good man. He'll be missed. He'll be missed. Missed by who? By the same people who never looked for me when I vanished 3 years ago? That night, as the city lights bled through my cracked blinds, something inside me shifted. I was done being buried quietly. I was done being a ghost haunting the edges of my own story. I walked to the closet, pulled out the black coat I hadn't worn since the divorce, and stared at it like it was a uniform. My fingers brushed the fabric, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. They had written my obituary, but I was still here, still breathing, still dangerous in the only way a dead man can be, with nothing left to lose. When the clock struck midnight, I looked at myself in the mirror and said the words aloud, slow and certain, "If they want a ghost, I'll give them one. The kind that doesn't fade quietly. The kind that returns when the living think the past is safe. The kind that knocks on the door during the toast. Because that's the thing about declaring someone dead. Sometimes the dead come back. And when they do, they don't come for forgiveness. They come for the truth." The morning after I saw that post, I sat in silence, watching the dust float through the weak sunlight that sneaked into my room. I didn't eat. I didn't move. My coffee went cold hours ago. Every sound outside, laughter, traffic, footsteps, felt like an insult. The world was moving on while I was stuck in a reality where my own son had buried me. The betrayal wasn't just in the post, it was in the ease with which they had done it. It wasn't grief they felt, it was relief. Relief that Henry Dawson, the burden, the reminder of what they owed, was gone. Do you know what it's like to realize your own blood doesn't even need you dead to erase you? To see them smiling, toasting, celebrating freedom from your memory? That's not just pain, that's annihilation. You start to question everything, your worth, your memories, your place in the world. For years, I told myself distance was good for them, that my leaving had given them peace. But peace doesn't come with champagne glasses and hashtags. No, Peace doesn't wear designer clothes and gather in your living room to clink glasses over your legacy. I looked around my small room, the cracked paint, the rusted fan, the single chair. Every object in it was something I salvaged after they pushed me out. I built their home with my hands. I paid for that roof shingle by shingle. Yet here I was, living like a stranger in the same city where my name once meant something. The contrast was unbearable. They lived in light, I lived in shadow. They had moved on, I was their ghost. But the ghost had eyes, and the ghost was awake now. What burned most wasn't that my son declared me dead, it was that no one corrected him. Not my sister, not my daughter-in-law, not a single person who had known me half a lifetime. Silence. The cruelest kind of murder. One done not with bullets, but with indifference. You expect strangers to forget you, but when your own blood does, it kills the man inside before the heart even stops. I tried to understand. Maybe they believed I was gone for good. Maybe they thought I'd never return. But if that were true, why use my house? Why pour drinks over my memories, in the living room I built for them? It wasn't a mistake, it was a statement. They wanted me erased. They wanted to bury me without the coffin. I stood up, my body stiff, my mind sharper than it had been in years. My hands trembled as I touched the wall. The same hand that had once held my son when he was sick, that had patched the roof in a storm, that had written letters no one read. All that love, all that loyalty, turned into nothing but an uncomfortable story they didn't want to remember. That realization was the moment something inside me cracked. And through that crack, light entered. Not the soft light of forgiveness, but the cold light of truth. That day, I understood what I had lost. I hadn't lost a family. I had lost an illusion, a story I'd told myself to survive. The story of a son who still cared. The story of a home that still had room for me. They had rewritten that story without me, and now it was my turn to write the ending. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't scream. I would return, not as the man they pitied, but as the man they feared would speak. When I stepped outside that afternoon, the air felt different. Heavy. The city that once ignored me now seemed to whisper my name in the hum of traffic. I walked past the park where I taught Adrian to ride his first bike. The bench where we once sat eating ice cream. I wondered if he ever thought of those days. Did he remember the hands that held him steady when he was too scared to pedal? Or had he buried those memories too? I didn't know the answer then, but one thing was clear. The man they thought was dead was about to remind them what living truly means. Because when a man has nothing left to lose, even silence becomes dangerous. And I wasn't planning to stay silent anymore. 20 years before my son declared me dead, my life had already started to die, piece by piece, lie by lie. It was a Thursday afternoon when the first crack appeared, though I didn't know it yet. I'd finished my shift early at the factory that day. My hands were still covered in sawdust, my shirt clinging to my back, but I was humming on the way home. I had planned to surprise my wife, Laura. Maybe bring her lunch, maybe just see her smile. It had been weeks since we'd talked like we used to. Back then, I thought the distance between us was just time and fatigue. I was wrong. It was betrayal wearing the mask of routine. As I turned onto our street, I noticed a car parked 2 houses away. Sleek, black, polished. It wasn't familiar. I'd seen that same car once before, at my brother Victor's office. He used to brag about it every holiday. When you work smart, not hard, you get this kind of comfort, he'd say. I laughed it off then. But when I saw it parked near my house, something cold crawled up my spine. I walked slower, my boots scraping against the pavement, every sound too loud, every step too heavy. The front gate was half closed. I remember thinking, she never leaves it like that. The house looked calm, too calm. Curtains drawn, windows shut, no sound of the TV or the humming she usually did when she cleaned. My keys jingled in my shaking hand. I unlocked the door, quiet as a thief, and stepped inside. The air was different. Thick, heavy. The kind that smells like perfume and secrets. I stood there, frozen, listening. Then, faintly, from upstairs, laughter. Not just any laughter, but not the tired, polite chuckle I had grown used to. This was light. Joyful. The sound of a woman who felt alive. A sound I hadn't heard in years. And it wasn't alone. A man's voice followed. Smooth. Confident. Familiar. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to know. But my feet betrayed me. They climbed the stairs one by one, slow, deliberate, like they were counting the seconds before my world ended. The seventh step creaked, it always did, and the laughter stopped. I froze, holding my breath. The air thickened. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I heard Victor's voice. My brother. My own blood. He won't be home yet. Relax. And then hers, whispering, what if he finds out? He chuckled. Henry? He'll never find out. He doesn't even see what's in front of him. Those words burned into me like fire through dry wood. My knees almost gave way, but I gripped the wall to keep from falling. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, listening to the sound of my life collapsing behind a wooden door. I walked back down the stairs like a ghost, my body moving but my soul staying behind. I walked past the kitchen where her apron still hung. Past the family photos smiling at me like cruel witnesses. I opened the front door and stepped outside, into a world that suddenly felt colder, darker, emptier. I walked for hours that day. No direction, no destination. I ended up by the old pier, the one we used to visit when life was simple. The water was still, but my reflection wasn't there. I was already gone, hollowed out by betrayal I couldn't yet speak about. When I finally returned home, the house smelled of dinner. The lights were on. The car was gone. She looked up and smiled like nothing had happened. You're home early, she said. And I smiled back, because I was a coward. Because sometimes love makes you blind, and pride keeps you silent. I ate her food. I slept beside her. I raised my children in that same house built on a lie. For years I told myself maybe I was mistaken. Maybe what I heard wasn't real. But the truth doesn't disappear. It hides. It festers. It waits for the right time to finish what it started. And 20 years later, when my son declared me dead, I realized something. My family had buried me long before that Facebook post. The party wasn't the first funeral they gave me. It was just the last 1.3 years after that day on the stairs. The pretending finally ended. Laura didn't hide it anymore. Victor stopped feeling guilty, if he ever had. My children, Adrian and Chloe, had grown cold, quiet, cautious around me, as if they'd already chosen sides but didn't have the courage to admit it. The air inside that house became poison. Every breath was another reminder that love had turned into pity. One Friday afternoon, the storm came, not from the sky, but from the living room. I still remember her words, Henry, it's time you moved out. This isn't your home anymore. It wasn't a fight. It was a sentence. Her voice was calm, deliberate, final. She was standing near the door, her bags packed, Victor's car keys dangling from her hand like proof of her new life. Adrian stood behind her, his arms folded. He was 25 then, a man I didn't recognize. The same boy who used to cry when I came home late now looked at me like a stranger taking up space. Moved out. I said, my throat dry. You mean thrown out? Laura didn't blink. Call it whatever you want, Henry. But this house isn't yours. It's in my name. Always has been. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that's what broken men do when words can't find their shape. I built this house. I worked double shifts. I bled into those bricks. My fingerprints were in the walls. Yet, in that moment, none of it mattered. Paper mattered. Signatures mattered. Her name mattered. Mine didn't. Adrian looked at me then, his eyes the same shade of betrayal as his mother's. Dad, please don't make this harder. She deserves to be happy. Deserves. That word cut deeper than any knife. And what about me? I asked. What do I deserve? Silence. The kind that swallows you whole. Chloe started to cry quietly, her face half hidden behind her hair. But she didn't speak. No one ever does in these moments. People cry for the noise, not for the man. My sister, Evelyn, walked in next, invited by them, not by me. Her perfume announced her before her words did. Henry, she said, don't make this ugly. Laura's just being honest. You've lost her years ago. And in her eyes, I saw it, the The same look Victor used to give me when we were kids. That smug satisfaction of taking what wasn't his. I understood then that Evelyn had known everything. She had known all along and had chosen her silence like a gift to them. I wanted to fight, to scream, to drag the truth into the light, but I couldn't. Pride held me still. Pride and exhaustion. So I did what cowards do. I packed. I took only what I could carry. 2 boxes, some tools, and the old leather photo album that still smelled like hope. When I stepped out of that house for the last time, the sun was setting behind the roof I had built. Victor's car waited at the curb, engine running, his shadow stretched across my driveway like a wound. Laura didn't say goodbye. Adrian didn't either. Only Chloe whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." And that whisper became the last kind sound I heard for years. I found a small room above a hardware store on 8th Street, 10 by 12 feet, barely enough for a bed and a chair. The walls were cracked, the floor uneven, but it was quiet. Too quiet. I used to lie awake at night listening to the pipes rattle, pretending they were voices. Pretending someone still needed me. Weeks turned into months. My savings dried up. The pension came late. The phone never rang. I became invisible. Not the kind of invisible that comes from hiding, but the kind that comes when no one looks for you. The kind that eats away at your existence until you start to question if you were ever real. Sometimes I'd walk past my old house. The curtains had changed, the flowers were gone, and new laughter echoed inside, the kind that belonged to people who didn't remember the man who built it. Once, I saw Victor mowing my lawn, shirtless and proud, while Laura brought him lemonade. Adrian helped him carry the tools. They didn't see me, but I saw enough. That night, I went back to my room and sat in the dark until morning. My hands ached to hold a hammer, a brush, something that would make me feel useful again. But there was nothing left to fix, except the truth. And the truth was simple. They had buried me alive, and I had let them. But that was before the day the post went viral. Before the night my son raised his glass to my memory. Before the ghost they created decided to come home. It was 3 nights after I saw that cursed post when the universe decided I had suffered enough silence. I was sitting on my rickety bed, eating cold noodles from a paper cup, when someone knocked on my door. It startled me. No one ever visited me. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe the landlord, maybe another lost soul looking for a place to sleep. But it wasn't either. It was Mr. Turner, the old carpenter who used to work with me back in the day. He looked smaller now, friendlier, but his eyes were sharp. The kind of sharp that comes with knowing something that can't stay buried. "Henry," he said quietly, "we need to talk." He came in without waiting for an invitation, sat down, and placed a yellow envelope on the table. He didn't look at me. He just stared at that envelope like it was something heavy, heavier than both of us. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just waited. Finally he sighed, and his voice cracked like old wood. "I saw the post," he said. "About your funeral. About your son." My jaw tightened. "You and half the city." He nodded slowly. "You deserve to know the truth, Henry. They didn't just bury you. They built the coffin, nailed it shut, and sold your name to buy their comfort." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He slid the envelope toward me. "Proof." Inside were documents, bank transfers, property deeds, copies of old contracts. My name, my signature, my life scattered in black ink. Except, something was wrong. The dates, the witnesses, even my supposed resignation from the house deed, all forged. My sister Evelyn's name appeared as a witness. So did Victor's. And Laura's. Turner looked at me, his voice trembling. "They planned it years ago, Henry. Right after you left. They moved everything under Laura's name using fake consent forms. Victor handled the papers, Evelyn vouched for it, and your son." He paused, his throat tightening. "Your son signed the final statement declaring you unfit to manage your own assets." The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. "Adrian. My boy. My flesh and blood." He signed. Turner nodded. "He thought he was helping his mother. They told him you were losing your mind. That you gambled. That you were dangerous." I sat back in my chair, the room spinning. Every lie fit perfectly now. The looks, the whispers, the distance. They hadn't turned against me overnight. They had been building this story for years. They'd replaced me before I even knew I was gone. Turner hesitated before speaking again. There's more, Henry. You deserve to know who started all this. He took a deep breath. It wasn't Laura. It wasn't Victor. It was Evelyn. I blinked. My sister? He nodded. She told Victor about your savings. About the land you inherited. She was the one who introduced Laura to his company. She told them both you'd never fight back. My hands clenched so tightly I felt the bones strain. Evelyn, the one I trusted to handle my documents when I was sick. The one who helped me pack when I left the house. The one who said, "Don't worry, Henry, I'll take care of everything." And she did. She took care of everything, except my dignity. Turner stood, his voice shaking. I shouldn't have kept this from you. But I thought, maybe it was better if you didn't know. I looked up at him, my voice low and steady. Better for who? He didn't answer. He just placed a small photograph beside the papers. A photo of my son standing next to Victor, both of them laughing in front of my house, the house I built. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just felt a calm I hadn't felt in years, the calm of clarity. They didn't kill me, I said finally, almost to myself. They freed me. Turner looked confused. Freed you? Yes, I said, standing slowly. Because now I know exactly what they buried. I walked to the mirror above the sink. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes, gray hair, worn face, but behind that face was fire. They thought they buried a weak man, I whispered. But they buried the wrong one. Turner opened his mouth, maybe to warn me, maybe to beg me not to do what he saw in my eyes. But it was too late. Some truths aren't meant to stay still. That night, I packed my old black suit. The same one I wore when I built that house's foundation. I polished my shoes until they reflected my face. I wasn't going to hide anymore. The time for ghosts to whisper was over. The time to walk among the living had begun. Because sometimes, the only way to reclaim your life is to attend your own funeral. The night I returned to that house, the city felt quieter than usual. Maybe it was the fog, maybe it was my mind, but every streetlight seemed to bend its light toward me, like the world was watching. I hadn't worn that black suit in years. It still carried the scent of sawdust and sweat from when I built the foundation of that same house. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who laid the bricks was walking into his own tomb. When I reached the gate, I heard music, soft jazz, laughter, glasses clinking. My house had become a stage for celebration. Through the windows, I could see them. My son Adrian in a tailored suit, his wife beside him, Victor laughing too loudly, Laura glowing like she'd never known sorrow. Evelyn, my sister, stood near the piano, smiling that same fake smile she wore at every family event. My funeral. My second funeral. I gripped the gate handle until my knuckles whitened, and for a moment, I almost turned back. But ghosts don't retreat, they haunt. I pushed the gate open. The creak of the hinges sliced through the music like a warning. Heads turned as I stepped inside. Conversations froze mid-sentence. A woman dropped her glass. The jazz kept playing until someone finally realized the ghost in the doorway was breathing. Adrian's face went pale. His lips parted but no words came. Laura's hand trembled around her wineglass. Victor's smile fell faster than his lies. Dad. Adrian whispered, voice cracking like he was 12 again. Don't stop the music, I said calmly, stepping further inside. It's not every day a dead man walks into his own memorial. The silence that followed was heavier than grief. I looked around at the faces that once meant home and saw only fear. The kind of fear that comes when the truth walks in uninvited. Laura was the first to speak. Mary, we thought. You thought what? I cut her off. That I'd disappear quietly? That your lies would stay buried under your champagne toasts? Victor stepped forward, his voice steady but his eyes darting. Henry, let's talk about this privately. No, I said. You took everything from me privately. Tonight, we do this in front of witnesses. I walked to the center of the room, the same spot where the family portrait once hung. It had been replaced by a newer one. Victor, Laura, Adrian, Evelyn. A picture-perfect lie. I pointed to it. You erased me from my own wall. You rewrote my story. And now I'm here to tell it back. Evelyn tried to speak, but her voice failed her. I turned to her, my eyes locking onto the sister I once trusted. Tell them, Evelyn. Tell them who started it. Tell them whose hands forged my signature. Or should I? Her lips trembled, but no sound came. I took a folded paper from my pocket, one of the forged documents Turner had given me, and tossed it onto the table. This, I said, is your masterpiece. My death certificate, signed by the people I called family. The room went still. Adrian looked at the paper, confusion battling horror. Mom, what is this? Laura's voice broke. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I said. You buried me with ink, not dirt. Victor took a step forward, his jaw tight. Enough, Henry. You left. You abandoned them. You don't get to play the victim now. I laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh that filled the room. I didn't abandon anyone, Victor. I was exiled by a family that traded truth for convenience. I turned to Adrian. His eyes were wet, wide, trembling. You want to know the truth, son? The man standing beside your mother, the one who replaced me, he's not just my brother. He's your real father. The room erupted. Laura gasped. Evelyn shouted something I couldn't hear. Victor tried to speak, but Adrian's voice drowned them all. No. No, that's not true. It is, I said quietly. It always was. Adrian staggered back, his glass falling, shattering against the floor. He turned to his mother, desperate for denial, but her silence was confession enough. Tears rolled down his face. You lied to me. All of you. Victor's mask cracked then. Henry, you're destroying everything. I met his gaze. No. I'm freeing it. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt something pure. Not revenge, not anger, just truth. It stood between us like light after a storm. I walked toward the door, the silence behind me deafening. You buried me alive once, I said, turning back one last time. But now you'll live every day knowing the dead remember. As I stepped into the night, the wind hit my face like a baptism. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past had already burned itself clean. Because sometimes, the only thing stronger than blood is truth. I didn't look back that night. The air was sharp, the streetlight pale, but for the first time in years, I felt warm. Not because of revenge, but because of release. I walked until my legs ached, until the weight of the past finally slipped off my shoulders. Every lie that had chained me, every silence that had buried me, was gone. The truth had burned it all clean. I ended up at the old pier, the same place where I had once stood decades ago, staring at the still water, wondering if I had the courage to keep living. That night, the water looked different. It reflected me, not the man I used to be, but the man who had walked through fire and didn't burn. You know what the hardest part is about being declared dead by your own family? It's realizing that you were never really alive to them. You were just convenient. A pair of hands, a wallet, a wall to lean on. But the moment you stop giving, they bury you in silence. Yet the truth is, you can't bury someone who remembers who they are. I breathed deeply, feeling the cold bite of the wind, and I smiled. A real smile, not of bitterness, but of survival. I had spent years searching for love from people who didn't even see me. But now, I understood. I didn't need their acceptance to exist. I didn't need their forgiveness to breathe. The only person I needed to reclaim was myself. As I stood there, I thought of all the people out there like me, the ones who were erased, ignored, replaced, forgotten. People who gave everything and were left with nothing but echoes. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever been buried alive by the people they loved. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to remember something. As long as you're breathing, no one gets to declare you dead. They can forget you, lie about you, erase your name, but they can't kill your voice unless you stay silent. And if you've ever felt like you were invisible, remember, ghosts don't fade when they speak. They rise. Because the living have one power the dead never will, choice. The choice to stand, to speak, to forgive, or to walk away. And sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you'll ever do. So if this story touched something in you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever been buried and had to dig your way back. Share this story with someone who's still trapped under someone else's lies. Because there are millions of people like me, people who were declared dead, but still breathing. And maybe your voice is the one that helps them rise. Like this video, subscribe for more real stories that prove one thing. Truth always walks back through the door. Because I, Henry Dawson, was never dead. I was just waiting for the world to notice I was still alive.